Shabbat Shalom. So who is confused by all the cow terminology? Right, we've got the ego, we have the para. We also know that such a thing as a shore. Sometimes we just take from the bakar, take from the herd. It seems almost like Hebrew really, really likes its cows. Yes, a little. And then of course we throw in the fact that you have male and female forms for each of these cows. It can get a little confusing. Do appreciate, however, that English has just as many words for cow, even if we don't differentiate between gender quite as much. And we don't just say cow, after all, the word calf and heifer, as used in the translations today, those are English. And you can also throw on top of that the word bull and the word steer, from the herd, longhorn, whatever you like. Most cultures have paid attention to cows. We like beef. Although uniquely, what we see in the readings for today are two non-consumptive versions of the cow. We're not just talking about lunch here or even a specific sacrifice. Instead, we have one cow, the Egel HaZahav, the golden calf, that was taken as a form of worship, and as we saw in our Torah readings, almost caused the complete destruction of the Jewish people before we've even gotten started. On the other hand, we have the Parah Adumah, the red heifer, which, when done correctly, allows us to draw closer to God than we could ever imagine possible. Two cows, one driving us away from God, one drawing us close to God. Apparently, it's not just about the cow, is it? If you can have a cow that brings you close, and you can have a cow that makes you go, then it's not the cow that's at issue here. It is what the people do with the cow. We don't have sacred animals in the way of some cultures. Instead, we have sacred laws. What was it about the golden calf that drove us away from God as we made and worshipped it? It was in opposition to God's commandments. It was 180 degrees opposite of what God had said. No matter how much Aaron tried to mitigate and soften and change and make it better than it could have been, it was still just wrong. It may not have broken quite as many commandments as they have been trying to do at first, but it definitely broke plenty. And as such, it was a symbol of driving us away from God. Whereas the Parah Adumah, the red heifer, for all of its illogic, for all of its opacity and inability for the human mind to wrap ourselves around what is happening, when performed, it draws us closer because it is the ultimate expression of acting according to God's commands, even when we don't understand, even when we can't explain exactly what's going on. When we act according to God's commands, we come closer. When we act against God's commands, we go further. Pretty straightforward, right? So let me give you a test cow. A literal test cow. And you tell me whether this is bringing us closer or whether this is bringing us further away from God. This cow is a bit less specific than the others, but this cow is in the possession of a doctor by the name of Edward Jenner. Anyone know Edward Jenner? Yeah. Great. What did Edward Jenner do with this sickly cow that was suffering from cowpox? He developed vaccines. What he did was he noticed that cowpox and smallpox were very, very similar. Although cowpox was not lethal to humans, and smallpox was. Anybody here ever suffer from smallpox? Anybody here ever heard of a person who had smallpox? I mean, like in your lifetime? A few here and there, yes. For the most part, smallpox is now confined only to the laboratories, and is not in the wild. And the thanks to this original cow that Dr. Jenner used, taking from the wisdom that had been known in many different forms in many non-European cultures, he found that if you took some of the ooze from the cow pox and you stuck it into a human, that the human's body would develop a resistance to smallpox. Now, 200 years ago, 1796, I think it was, right around there, the end of the 18th century, it wasn't exactly a perfect system. The resistance did not last for your entire lifetime in most cases. The transmission of the vaccine from one part of the world to the other was very difficult, and oftentimes they would have to use like living vaccine incubators to go from one place to another. It's really fascinating and a little disgusting. But that is the reason why you have never had to be afraid of smallpox in your life, when for most of human history, it was one of the biggest killers of all. Now, how does this have to do with cows? Like I said, cowpox is the first, but it was even stamped into the ultimate thing. What is the Latin word, or even the Spanish word for cow? Vaccine. Vaccinas. From the cow is how we named this process. It is from the cow. See, you learn something by coming to shul. So, the question then becomes, here we have quite a complicated, and like I said, even in, especially in the early days, a bit disgusting of a technique of smearing the pus from a cow that is sick into a human being. Is that golden calf type behavior? Is that red heifer type behavior? Are we moving against God's commandments, or are we moving towards God's commandments as we are involved in this vaccination endeavor? I heard one neither, I heard a lot of towards. Well, in order to understand this, we're going to have to figure out what commandments are involved. What commandments would we be moving forward to? Because certainly God never said, take the ooze from a cow and stick it into a person. That is definitely not one of our shouts that is found in the Torah. So what commandments does God say that we would say that using vaccines is moving us towards the fulfillment of those commands? Saving lives. Right? Saving lives. But the vaccine is a very curious thing. Because a vaccine is not a cure directly. It is not something that you give to a person that is sick and save their life. It is not a medicine. It is instead a preventative device. It is something that is used not to rescue a person that is already suffering, but to prevent the suffering from beginning in the first place. So we have to actually say we're saving lives eventually. The thing about a vaccine is that it does not provide us that emotionally satisfying magic of giving somebody medicine that brings them back from their illness. Instead, it prevents catastrophe that we haven't actually seen. And that is hard for us emotionally to understand, but that is actually saving more than a cure would save the currently infected. But perhaps you would say that we only need to use a vaccine on the people who are most likely to get sick, or the people who are most likely to die if they get sick. But instead, those that are healthy, no reason to give them a shot in the arm. Right? Those that are strong, those that are virile, those that eat lots of kale, why would they need to have a vaccine? Well,
I was going to say, now we're back to the cow thing. Because it's herd.
Because we're part of the same herd. Right? And we know that because it says explicitly in the Torah, Al ta'amod dam re'echa. Do not stand by the blood of your fellow. If you have it in your capacity to aid one that is in danger, you are obligated to use every effort at your disposal, all of your might, all of your power, to prevent the other person from suffering and, God forbid, dying. Even if you yourself are not in jeopardy, God has commanded us to do what we can to save the lives of others. Judaism is a herd religion, a flock religion. There's a reason why the image of the shepherd is so common in all of the songs and metaphors of our prophets. Because God wants us to care for one another. What is the first statement that is trying to avoid guilt? Am I my brother's keeper? The first time that a person has done something horrible to another, the immediate explanation of why it doesn't matter is, hey, I'm not responsible for him. I'm only responsible for me. And God says, that's not the way it works. That is not the way it works. You and by the blood of your fellows. If you have the ability to save them, you must save them. If you are standing on the edge of a riverbank and there was a person drowning in the center and there was a life preserver there, you do not get to say, I didn't push him in. You don't get to say, well, I didn't know how to swim, so I couldn't go in. You have to take the life preserver and throw it and use every effort. Yes, if you can't swim, no one is expecting you to throw yourself in and drown. But you do have to do everything possible to prevent that person from dying. There is still resistance, unfortunately, in our contemporary society to the use of the miracle of vaccines. God has given us these tools. Just as God gave us the para adimah, the red heifer, just as God gave us the commands to make our life better, He has given us these tools in order that we can. And with the command that we serve the needs of each other, that we defend the life of one another, that we think beyond our own narrow self-interest. And so I am very proud that the Temple Israel was able to participate with Seminole County to be a vaccine site on Thursday. And I'm hoping that we'll be able to offer more when they are available through the county. And I hope that as they continue to open up the vaccines to more and more people, that more and more will be able to come to be vaccinated, even if you yourself do not feel you are in jeopardy. Because not just everybody is vulnerable. Because unfortunately, I think that's true, but unfortunately when I tell people everybody is vulnerable, people who think they are invulnerable don't listen. But everybody knows somebody who is vulnerable. Because everybody is a human being living within a community. If you wish to isolate yourself at the bottom of the ocean in a small submarine with just you, if you wish to build your own space station and go up, then fine, you have chosen to turn your back on humanity, and in some ways you're no longer really human. But if you're going to live on this earth, what you do affects others. And we must stand together to make sure that we have done everything to save everyone.